Hi, everyone. It's Alyssa, and I am so excited to review the movie Project Hail Mary, directed by Phil Lord and Chris Miller, and starring Ryan Gosling, Sandra Huller, and James Ortiz. This movie is amaze, amaze, amaze. There is no other way to say it. So I'm going to give a brief synopsis, but if you haven't seen the trailer, I would say just listen to this brief synopsis and then go to the theater. Do not watch the trailer. So the movie is essentially about Ryland Grace, played by Ryan Gosling, who is a science teacher, but he's also a molecular biologist. He's a doctor. And so he is kind of one of the only ones who can figure out what is going on with they're like these cell organisms that are eating stars essentially, or taking over stars. And then you find out exactly how these cells are working and what they are doing. And so it's going after our largest star, the sun, and basically all of Earth is going to die in 30 years if we don't figure this out and do something about it. But yet there is this one star that is not getting attacked by these cells. And it's sort of like, okay, what does this star have that the other ones don't, that is actually helping it to survive? And then we can take that and then apply it so that we don't die. And so a very small group of people essentially have to go into space and investigate this. And that's sort of the main setup of the movie. And I wish that that is what everyone had going into it. But in the trailer, they definitely give away something that is such a key plot point, and they have been talking about this character in a lot of the promotion. And I know it's to get people to the theater, but I really wish they didn't, because it would be such a great surprise. So if you don't know, just go, stop this, watch the movie, come back, because there is so much to be surprised about in the film. If you've seen the trailer, I'm not going to really spoil anything that's outside of the trailer. So there's nothing, I'm not going to talk about anything that really happens too much within the later part of the story, but just keep in mind, it's better if you don't watch the trailer. So I will start by saying, while I had very high expectations for this movie because it is a Ryan Gosling movie and he is my favorite actor, nothing could prepare me for how much I actually loved this story. So this is based on the novel from Andy Weir called Project Hail Mary. I specifically did not read the book because I hate that feeling of having to compare the book to the movie, and I can't shut my brain off from doing that. I'm so glad that I didn't, because I'm certain that the book goes into a lot more of the scientific and technical jargon, just like The Martian did, because I read and saw The Martian, and the book had a lot more of the science of everything in it, which was great in the book, but totally unnecessary in the movie. So I feel like that is a great thing that they let out. I also feel like a lot of Ryland Grace's maybe pre-story is sort of let out of this, because the story starts here where he is, which I know is the same way in the book. He is already in space. The character has no idea why he's there. He has amnesia. It goes through flashbacks, kind of piecing together even what he's doing there, why he is by himself at this point in the story. And I would say there is such a humanity with all of it, because this character is truly a human, which is what makes this movie so special feeling. Is it doesn't just discard characters who lose their life. It actually humanizes everyone in the story. And that moment is when I knew, wow, this movie is going to be phenomenal. And it's not like your average sort of sci-fi thriller, and the movie is a lot less conflict oriented than I thought it was going to be, which is amazing for me, because sometimes when it gets to the conflict part of the story and it's how are they going to pull this off, and it takes 30 minutes to get there, and it just feels like a lot of plottiness sort of getting in the way. This movie sort of breezes past a lot of that. And I feel like so much for the better that it does that. The story is already 2.5 hours long. I don't think there is a scene that you could take out of the story. I don't think there is anything you really needed to add to the story. It just feels perfectly edited. I will say things like the match cuts between the past and the present were so inventive, so creative. So that kind of takes me to Phil Lord and Chris Miller. I'm not used to them directing like actually live action films. When I looked at their filmography, the main film they've made is 21 Jump Street, which is actually my favorite comedy of all time. Whenever people say, what comedy do you love? That's it. Because I think that's shot in such an inventive way. The comedy is so fast, it still has a heart. So it's like not surprising how good they are here. And I feel like with Cloudy, with A Chance of Meatballs, with which they directed, and then what was the other one? It's another great film that they did, the Lego Movie, which has so much pathos in it. And they worked on the Spider-Verse, like they understand how to bring all of that empathy to animation, which is why I think they were the perfect choice here, because visually this movie is something to look at. When you are on, there's a planet called Adrian, that is something special to look at when you are watching it on IMAX, and everything is just sort of enveloping you. When you see Rocky's, who I will explain in a second, Rocky's spaceship the first time, it is genuinely something to look at. And everything is just so visually interesting and real feeling. And that's because it is. And so the one thing that you do see in the trailer, which I wish you didn't see, was the fact that Ryland Grace, makes contact with this like rock alien, otherworldly form that sort of moves around like a spider, and that character is so intrinsically important to the story. And I knew that character existed going into the story. I just didn't really understand like how much of a part he was going to play in what the story is all about, because fundamentally the story is so much about friendship, and the story is so intimate while being about, yes, saving the world. And that is a key thing in terms of what's going on in the story. You are so outrageously invested in the relationship that develops between Grace and Rocky throughout the entire story that other things start to go to the back of your mind. And this goes to the fact that I think Ryan Gosling, I have always thought he is such an underrated actor, even though he's a movie star, because I don't always think people understand like the way he is approaching acting in stories. And I felt like this movie actually took the best of everything that he has in him and put it into this movie. And this is, he is one of the producers on this movie, and I can tell because it feels so much like him. So down to like the eating the Twizzlers the entire time, which I know are his favorite candy because that is my favorite candy. And when I saw an interview, I thought that was really funny. But then also to like the fun cardigans and the fact that the cardigan has a fox on it. And even he made that like the interview in England, there was like a talk show of, what's an unpopular opinion. And he said, you don't give foxes enough credit. And then it was like, well, there was a fox in the sweater. He's always like interconnecting things together. I feel like he's very smart that way, especially in terms of like promoting and advertising, but also the sunglasses, like the high pitched noise, all of those things that are very quintessentially him. But then going back to the drama, which is really where he started. So when I think of movies like Blue Valentine and Half Nelson and Drive and things that do require a lot more of a darker dramatic tone, but he actually adds so much of that dramatic tone into this whilst also keeping it so light, so funny. It's his brand of humor, and it felt like him while being like a slightly toned down version, right? Like, so when you think of Ken, it's so over the top. And, a lot of the films, Nice Guys, I think is one of the funniest movies ever, but that's like really over the top comedy. And this just keeps everything surprisingly grounded. And there is such a great understanding of like tone within this story and making sure that the emotion of the story is actually like the center of everything and not relying too much on the comedy, even though the comedy just hits so well. And there are sequences where the whole audience could not stop laughing. And I will not give any of those away, but there is one in particular that I will say reminded me of one of my cats so much that it was just, I think any person who relates to having a relationship to something that is not of your species is going to relate to this movie so dramatically. I can say I cried at least 3 times in this movie, and I did not think this was going to be that kind of a story where I had to worry about crying and bringing tissues, but I was wrong. I totally needed to, and I definitely messed that part up. And then this brings me to the chemistry that he had with Rocky, and the fact that it's not CGI makes all the difference in the world. So the Rocky character is a puppet, and it's manned by anywhere from 4 to 7 people. And James Ortiz, who is the voice of Rocky, who I do not believe was originally supposed to be the voice of Rocky, ends up playing the voice because he was just reading lines with Ryan Gosling and giving him someone to play off of. And they could have done a tennis ball. They could have done CGI. This costs a lot more money, but it goes back to that like old school style of filmmaking that I do feel certain people so desperately want to hold on to because it makes such a difference in the feeling of the movie. The production design, everything feels so tactile and real because it is real. You have a connection with Rocky as he's kind of like walking around because Rocky is real as a puppet. And the more that James Ortiz started giving the lines back and forth, the more that they realized, no, he is the voice of Rocky. And it was just perfect. Like, and it's incredible to see the right person for the job actually getting the role, which also takes me to Sandra Huller, who, is such an underrated actress. And to see her in a big Hollywood blockbuster movie, but never deviating from the kind of actress that she is and not having to demean herself in any way is amazing. And she gets, she is incredible with all of the scenes that she's in, but she has one scene in particular that wasn't in the script, that is a singing sequence. You may have heard what it is, you may have not, so I will not say what the song is, but I didn't know the song because I'm an idiot and I don't know anything that is really past like 2010 at this point, especially from, I would say, more popular artists. But the song just works so perfectly. Her voice is, stunning in this movie. And her character is very complex and has so many different levels. And there are actions that she takes that, she is ultimately always doing the right thing, but things don't always appear that way on the outset, I'll say. And she did such a great job with the character. And I thought the story structure, so I talked about like the match cuts working really well, but then also the back and forth in terms of like the score of this movie is amazing. And that's not something I've really been hearing people talk about. So the score is done by Daniel Pemberson, who has a background in electronic music, synthesizers, things like that. And this sort of felt like, and again, this is like my Disney is showing, it felt like a mix of music you would hear in Epcot, like in the Future World area, although it's not called that anymore, and Animal Kingdom. And there was something that felt both organic and otherworldly, kind of galactic about everything, but in a way that doesn't sound like a lot of space movies that have been coming out. So this isn't a score that would be like a Hans Zimmer or something like this. It feels totally unique. And I think that is, at the end of the day, what makes this movie so incredible. The tone is not the tone you necessarily expect it's going to be. It is a big movie, but it does feel smaller, and it feels so much more about like smaller connections, and Grace being a character who has a really hard time making connections with people, and then seeing how like those connections can develop, and seeing how like that last name of Grace turns out to be so meaningful, especially when you get to certain parts of the story and you realize things about his background. And, once again, not giving spoilers, but when you get to the end of the movie, the end is just so perfect. And again, I'm so glad I didn't read the book because I know it's the exact same ending as the book, which is the perfect ending, and an ending that I read they were not scared to film, but were scared that people were going, like the studio was going to make them refilm it, because it is, there is something that is just like slightly weird throughout the entire film, but in the best possible way. Like, it is literally Ryan Gosling proving that he has chemistry with anyone or anything. So in this movie, it's like anything from a mop that he has chemistry with to a rock that he has chemistry with, and all of the characters in between. And you're like, he's so good at making other actors look amazing, but he brings so much in terms of like changing the script, ad-libbing things. And it's just like, you know what it is that is him, because there is something distinctive that feels very stamped upon by all of his movies. And I'm glad that there is this film that he has such a big part of that actually does it all and does it so brilliantly. So there is nothing in this movie that I would really change. I'm so excited to read the book now and like fill everything out. And I'm definitely going to watch the movie again. And so I know people say it all the time, like, oh, this is a movie you have to watch in the movie theater. But like, it actually is, you really feel like you are walking into another universe. And, the things in space are just so gorgeous, but the way everything is shot in the film is beautiful, and it is worth going for like the sound design and the visuals and the acting, but also the like togetherness of the comedy of like the everything. By the end of this movie, the entire theater, including myself, was clapping. And I cannot tell you the last time I was at a movie where the whole audience was clapping, because I'm not the person who's going to like a Marvel movie the first week that it's coming out. I go a few weeks after because I like don't really want to deal with it. But with this, I was like happy to be in a packed theater, because it was this original story that actually was genuine and made you feel good, but it didn't feel cheesy and it didn't feel manipulative in any way. And every emotion is hard earned and everything looks real in the movie. And it is something that when you experience it with other people and you can feel that excitement from other people, I myself was smiling the entire film, but I just got this feeling like so was the whole theater. And that is a very memorable experience. And that's why movies need to exist and IMAX needs to exist. And it just made me so happy to be a part of it on this first weekend. So I would definitely recommend an IMAX showing. If you've seen the movie, please tell me what you think. I think this is the kind of movie you really do recommend to everyone. I mean, the critical scores are insane, but the audience scores are even better at this point. So please let me know what you think. If you've seen the movie, if you've read the book, I have a spring break coming up soon. So I already know that's the book I'm reading during this spring break, and I'm super excited to do so. As always, I love hearing what you guys have to say, and I will see you all later. Bye.